Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, where we will discuss the findings of a new evaluation commissioned by the Evaluation Department of Norway's anti-corruption efforts. My name is Jan Petter Holtedal. I'm the Evaluation Department's project manager for this evaluation. This has been an exercise in teamwork, however. My project partner, Balbir Singh, has contributed vital inputs and advice throughout. Ragnhild Maria Pedersen has been crucial in organizing today's webinar. Sincere thanks to both. Corruption, often defined as misuse of entrusted power for private gain, is a global problem with grand proportions and a major obstacle to reducing poverty. According to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the global cost of corruption is $2.6 trillion annually, equal to 5% of global GDP, or 17 times global ODA of $153 billion in 2018. Anti-corruption is a priority within Norway's overall development policy and assistance. It is of interest, therefore, to learn what works and what challenges remain. The anti-corruption landscape has evolved significantly since Norway's anti-corruption efforts were last evaluated in 2011. Through this evaluation, we hope to bring new insight into how Norway's anti-corruption efforts could be strengthened as part of its development policy and assistance. We also hope that the evaluation will be useful for other actors seeking to strengthen their anti-corruption efforts. The evaluation has been carried out by a team from Nordic Consulting Group Copenhagen, led by Charlotte Vaillant. I thank the team for having completed a challenging task. We are grateful for inputs from stakeholders involved in this process from the MFA, Norad, embassies, in particular colleagues in Jakarta and Nairobi, and others, and for expert advice provided by Professor Tina Søreide. I will now hand over to Eva Bratholm, who will guide us through today's webinar and moderate a panel debate after the presentations. Eva has been Norad's communications director and has vast experience as a journalist and communications expert. We're in good hands. Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We have invited 4 participants to this webinar. State Secretary Marianne Hagen will give a response from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Samuel Kihara, Humanitarian Affairs Officers from Somalia Humanitarian Fund, will offer a perspective from Somalia. Professor Tina Søreide will give an overview of experiences from other countries. And team leader for the evaluation, Charlotte Vaillant, will present the findings from the evaluation. There are 234 people registered for this webinar. The report was published on Norad's website yesterday, and you will find it there under evaluation. If you like to ask questions during the seminar, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. If you are watching from YouTube, I'm afraid we do not have the option to ask questions from there. We have a time frame of 1 hour, so I ask everybody to be brief and clear. We will now have a presentation of the main findings in the evaluation. I have the pleasure of giving the floor to Charlotte Vaillant, Evaluation Team Leader, Nordic Consulting Group.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlotte Vaillant. I am the team leader for this evaluation, and I'm delighted to present some of the key conclusions from this evaluation today. This evaluation was conducted by a team of 5 experts and involved 2 country visits, one in Indonesia to look at the forestry sector, and one in Somalia to look at Norway's development assistance in a fragile context. We also interviewed numerous stakeholders at headquarters and in partner countries. Let me start by saying that Norway's anti-corruption efforts are wide-ranging. Many actors associate Norway's anti-corruption approach to anti-corruption with its zero-tolerance policy, which in effect requires all partners to take the necessary measures both to prevent and deal with financial irregularities. But anti-corruption is also a cross-cutting priority for Norway, alongside gender, human rights, climate and environment. Until 2018, this involved mainstreaming anti-corruption elements into all programs and projects, while ensuring these same programs and projects didn't cause any unintended effects. In addition, the evaluation finds that over 2010 to 2018, more than 500 grants worth a total of 1.2 billion Norwegian krones had anti-corruption as their primary objectives, whether by promoting transparency, accountability, and/or integrity, or by tackling corruption head-on. Finally, Norway has also been very active in promoting anti-corruption on the global front, notably through the UN, working with a range of institutions and actors, including civil society. In the remaining presentation, I will focus on 3 sets of findings that have led to key recommendations in the synthesis report. The need for a more comprehensive and explicit anti-corruption strategy, steps to better operationalize Norway's zero-tolerance policy across all delivery channels, and the role that embassies could play in promoting the global anti-corruption agenda. As some of you may know, Norway doesn't have a single anti-corruption strategy. Instead, various documents such as the Grant Management Assistance or the Zero Tolerance Policy and Guidelines, but also public speeches are used to guide and reiterate Norway's commitment to anti-corruption. This informal approach is found to come with a number of shortcomings. First, anti-corruption and the results associated with anti-corruption are not well defined, which means that Norway's overall contribution to anti-corruption remains largely unknown. While gender is used as a marker in the OECD DAC aid statistics, there is no such thing for AC, despite anti-corruption being a key component of the Sustainable Development Goal 16. At the same time, looking at individual anti-corruption programs and projects sampled as part of this evaluation, we can find good results in relation to helping recover stolen assets, strengthening anti-corruption institutions, and promoting local participation. Secondly, the link between aid and corruption is not sufficiently well considered. The minimum requirement, of course, is that Norway's delivery partners have the right systems and procedures in place to ensure Norway's aid money is well spent and does reach end beneficiaries. The problem with corruption, however, is that aid misuse can also serve to perpetuate or even institutionalize corrupt practices and systems in partner countries. This, in turn, undermines prospects for peace and development. While Norway fully recognizes that a do-no-harm approach is key to dealing with anti-corruption as a cross-cutting issue, in practice, there is very little guidance or even good practices out there on how to apply a do-no-harm lens to anti-corruption across all programs and projects. A third shortcoming is that taking the corruption context into account is still not consistently applied across sectors and countries. For example, the evaluation finds little attempts to promote anti-corruption as a distinct component and/or as a cross-cutting issue in the global health sector, while in contrast, Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative in Indonesia was found to have effectively mainstreamed corruption issues and anti-corruption element into its strategy and its project portfolio. Finally, the lack of a more explicit and comprehensive strategy was also found to have reduced opportunities for learning. The evaluation finds that more resources are needed internally to learn what works and doesn't work in the fight against corruption. Moving on to the next set of findings on zero tolerance policy in practice. What is apparent is that Norway's zero tolerance policy to corruption has paid off over the years. Norway's delivery partners, not just NGOs, but also multilateral organizations, have evidently invested significant resources in strengthening their risk and grant management practices over the years, often on the back of major corruption scandals. An interesting example is the spatial financing facility, which Norway developed in the earlier part of the evaluation period in Somalia, which combined the use of country system with extensive safeguard mechanism. The reality on the ground, however, is that NGOs often remain the frontline delivery partners and as a result take more risk and with it bear a greater share of the costs associated with Norway's zero tolerance policy. And in countries where corruption is particularly high, NGOs also have to remain vigilant and innovative to avoid new corrupt practices taking place. This needs to be more fully recognized and addressed. Another issue is the lack of transparency. 82% of the cases of financial irregularities reported by Norway over the 2010-19 period were concerned with local, international, or Norwegian NGOs. In contrast, Norway only reported a few individual cases handled by multilaterals over the same period. Currently, outside some global statistics, there is hardly any information available on individual cases of investigation handled by multilaterals in partner countries. With roughly 50% of Norway's aid money being channeled through multilaterals today, this leaves a major gap in information, not just for Norway and other donors, but also for civil society and delivery partners on the ground. The increasingly complex web of UN and other international and national delivery partners working through multilaterals further adds to this particular challenge. The third issue I wanted to talk about is a call for Norway to continue to push through its ambitious agenda on anti-corruption on the global arena, dealing with difficult but also highly relevant issues such as money laundering, grant corruption, and safe haven. In large parts, thanks to Norway's advocacy efforts, the UNCAC Conference of the States Parties passed a resolution dealing with corruption involving vast quantities of assets in 2017. And needless to say, this resolution has a strong resonance in many of Norway's partner countries, where grant corruption is regularly highlighted as a key issue. And this success demonstrates Norway's comparative advantage as a small and neutral country. There is, however, an opportunity to involve embassies more fully in the global anti-corruption agenda. All the more so that the evaluation finds little evidence of embassies conducting regular dialogue with governments on anti-corruption issues in their respective countries. But embassies could also play a more active role in using the work that Norway is doing on promoting international norms and standards to sustain a more regular dialogue on anti-corruption with partner countries. So these are the few findings that I wanted to share with you. You'll find that I hope it provides a good discussion for today's seminar. There is a more extensive set of findings and recommendations in our reports. which I hope you will find useful and relevant. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. We will now have 3 comments to the report. First, State Secretary Marianne Hagen, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Colleagues, friends, first of all, let me congratulate the Nordic Consulting Group team and the Evaluation Department in Norad on a job well done. The team has produced a balanced report that gives us a lot of recognition and thumbs up, much appreciated, as well as a number of recommendations for improvement. I believe that the evaluation report is timely and valuable input in our endeavors to strengthen Norway's anti-corruption efforts. The MFA will provide a formal written plan of action as our response to the recommendations after a thorough process in the coming weeks. So my response today has to be of a preliminary nature. The Ministry is challenged to formulate and adopt a comprehensive anti-corruption strategy and to dedicate more resources to operationalize anti-corruption efforts across all 4 categories. In accordance with the UN Convention Against Corruption, Norway and all other state parties shall, and I quote, develop, implement or maintain effective coordinated anti-corruption policies, unquote. We do have policies and positions regarding our international efforts to prevent and combat corruption, but we still lack an overall anti-corruption strategy or policy. This gap has been highlighted before and probably will again in the upcoming OCHA implementation review of Norway. I take this recommendation very seriously, and we will start the process to respond to it. And I agree, the role of the private sector and the embassies may be enhanced. Secondly, the MFA is recommended to strengthen the operationalization of Norway's zero tolerance policy, making it more uniform and transparent across all aid delivery channels. Important results have been achieved in improved anti-corruption policies, bodies, and practices in NGOs and multilateral organizations managing Norwegian funds, partly as a consequence of our CTP. The challenges remain, in particular since the CTP may incorrectly seem to apply almost only to NGOs. The MFA has decided to establish a working group with a mandate to look into ways and means to improve the implementation of the CTP, including in our cooperation with the multilateral organizations. The third recommendation pertains to anti-corruption as a cross-cutting issue. Yes, we still face challenges in including anti-corruption as a key element in the risk management approach at grant, sector, and country levels. It seems that staff and partners at times are not sufficiently tuned into the risk of corruption, undermining the goal achievement in humanitarian assistance and long-term development cooperation. The do no harm approach was chosen in 2017 after careful consideration of the past experience with the very demanding do good approach to cross-cutting issues. More training and increased leadership attention will hopefully make a difference. The fourth recommendation pertains to anti-corruption as a distinct component. The MFA is challenged to further promote anti-corruption efforts in partner countries by combining support to local and global initiatives, cooperate with NGOs, strengthen the dialogue with governments, forge partnerships with other donors, and adopt a result-based approach. Good governance and anti-corruption figure prominently in budget items, as well as in many strategies of Norway's cooperation with partner countries. We work closely with NGOs. However, I do believe that there is a potential for a more systematic and strengthened approach to dialogues, cooperation with other donors, and technical assistance. Finally, the MFA is recommended to continue to push for a more ambitious global anti-corruption advocacy agenda and promote more regular dialogue with partner countries. The report recognizes Norway's positive contribution to strengthening international norms and standards, in particular in the areas of grant corruption and illicit financial flows. UN resolutions, expert meetings, financial support to technical cooperation, and lately, the high-level panel on financial accountability, transparency, and integrity, the FACTI panel, illustrate our approach. They demonstrate commitment, innovative ideas, strategic partnerships, perseverance, and courage, sometimes against all odds. We will pursue an ambitious anti-corruption agenda, in particular in preparation for the UN General Assembly special session on anti-corruption in 2021. More systematic and regular dialogues with partner countries may be very useful in this context. Improved tax systems, anti-corruption, and fighting illicit financial flows have a huge potential in mobilizing resources for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. This has become even more important in the current context of COVID-19 and its devastating socioeconomic consequences. We will carefully study the evaluation report and Norad's recommendations for follow-up. I cannot promise that we are in full agreement with all the findings, conclusions, or recommendations of the Nordic Consulting Group team, but the report is an important input in our deliberations to further develop and refine our comprehensive approach to anti-corruption. We will work closely with other ministries and with Norad in accordance with the division of work established between us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now have a response from another perspective. Please, Samuel Kihara, Humanitarian Affairs Officer, Somalia Humanitarian Fund, OCHA in Somalia.
Improved capacity of partners. Hello everyone, my name is Samuel Kihara, the Accountability Manager in OCHA Somalia Humanitarian Fund. I would like to take this opportunity to make a brief presentation regarding Norway's contribution to UN OCHA Somalia Humanitarian Fund management and accountability measures. Norway remains one of Somalia Humanitarian Fund's important donors, which has kept the fund relevant since it was started in 2010. As a country-based pool fund, its management is through an advisory board in which donors hold a rotating membership and are involved in making strategic decisions, which Norway has been an active participant. Among the decisions of the advisory board has been the development and implementation of funding assurance and accountability measures aimed at eliminating diversion of aid, corrupt activities, and fraud to ensure that the much needed assistance reaches the target communities in Somalia. All the SHF donors have been actively involved in the design of the fund's accountability framework and continue to provide valuable contribution towards its improvement, especially through the fund's operational manual, which is revised every year. The SHF accountability framework outlines measures to increase accountability and mitigate risks. The framework comprises of interlinked pillars, which include 1. Partner capacity and performance assessment and risk assignment, which is important in ensuring the fund has a portfolio of partners that are credible and able to manage funds and implement quality projects. Secondly, project monitoring and associated programmatic reporting to assess progress of implementation and obtain feedback from the respective communities. Thirdly, financial spot checks, reporting and audits to assess the financial processes of funded projects. The dynamic nature of the framework ensures that it is continuously updated with the most recent partner performance information, which complements other components to reflect the overall capacity and risks associated with individual SHF partners. Evidently, this has led to improved capacity of partners and consequent project implementation quality with reduced non-compliance cases. OCHA will continue engaging with the respective donors, including Norway, on accountability issues towards eliminating corrupt activities and diversion or mismanagement of aid in the challenging Somalia environment. The SHF Operational Manual annual update provides an opportunity through which new accountability and compliance measures can be added to improve on the existing ones in future. Thank you.
Right. The third comment on the evaluation comes from Professor Tina Søreide, Norwegian School of Economics, please.
Thank you very much. I will give a brief comment on the international situation. Just waiting for my slides. So, the first thing I want to point out is that corruption is a serious challenge for the whole development community. Other development partners too are really troubled by this difficulty, including the most advanced in terms of goal management, like this example from DFID shows, where they lost huge amounts in the education sector in Pakistan. And that is not meant as a defense of Norway, but it is important to keep in mind that corruption is difficult for all, because those involved in corruption are criminals who know very well how to conceal their crimes. And they hide, and they are also very good at hiding their funds, the stolen funds, in tax havens. And financial secrecy is an impediment to efficient aid for the whole development community. Research shown, presented this year, including by one Norwegian researcher, show that the most most aid-dependent countries had an increase in the amounts placed in tax havens as they got more funding. Another aspect I want to point out is that in the development community, the best anti-corruption strategies have been developed by frontrunners. For example, this speech by President Wolfenson of the World Bank in 1996, the Cancer of Corruption speech, made a huge difference in terms of bringing anti-corruption up at the agenda. The EU has introduced very strict auditing on their aid, and the IMF aims at bringing anti-corruption into macroeconomics. And such frontrunners raise the standards for the whole development community. A third aspect I want to point out is how development aid actually is club activity, and Norway contributes and benefits from international best practices. They contribute in meeting places, and they develop, for example, this set of recommendations from the OECD. But what we see in research is that those agencies, so while all the agencies speak about anti-corruption, those agencies that have, they come from countries where with a reasonably good control of corruption are much stricter in terms of anti-corruption abroad. So there is a difference when we look at the composition of multilaterals as well. If donor agencies have control of corruption at home, they are more serious abroad. And that's an important takeaway. When it comes to this report, I think it makes very good sense. The development of a strategy, of course, enable actors to operate with zero tolerance and better risk assessment. That's something we all can agree to. I also think the report points out the need for better coordination when it comes to sharing information about risks and incidents and across the development community. And I think it points out the importance of bringing this out to the country level. This cannot become an Oslo development strategy. It has to be brought out in the countries and to the various stakeholders locally. However, what I'm reflecting upon is whether Norway also has the ambition and the opportunity to become a front runner in anti-corruption. Norway has very good institutions at home. We are trusted and we have competence on the critical aspects. However, in order to really bring anti-corruption forward, we also need to see corruption as a crime and be willing to do the necessary audits and investigation and demand law enforcement. There has to be consensus around this topic despite competing political aims, and there has to be aspiration on behalf of the whole development community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There is a lot of positive feedback in this report. As Marianne said, it's thumbs up on Norwegian efforts against corruption. But the question is, does it have the right mix of measures? I'd like to challenge you, Samuel, on that. Does Norway have the right mix of measures?
Thank you. I would say the report is good. Okay, it captures an area of efforts that have been made. It captures the situation as it is in terms of where Norway is, in terms of what is it they have in their policies or other guidelines, and highlights the weaknesses. Of course, importantly, and the way forward, what needs to be done. It does that comprehensively. The only minor clarification that maybe from my side I would like to point out is, when systems are put in place, they depend on one, how comprehensive they are. Secondly, the capacity of people who are implementing them. Okay, there is an appreciation of that in terms of acknowledging that this will require some technical staff to see this through. But what I saw that is not coming out clearly is the preventive aspect of it, these measures. Because when you look at something like an audit, when we say that we are going to audit, fine, audits will tell us what has happened with the funds. But prior to the audit, it's important that we have preventive measures. And when I say preventive measures, is that we are able to monitor. Okay, when we give aid, we give assistance. Okay, what are we putting in place? What measures are in place to ensure, to ensure that we prevent potential risk of diversion? Okay, and here I'll bring out the usual tools, like spot checks. The other tools is like when we put in tranche mechanisms. How do we give assistance? Okay, if for example we are giving a certain amount of money, we may put it in tranches so that wherever a certain milestone is reached, we are able to have done a certain oversight, okay? In terms of, like I said, spot checks, and it's like a mini audit of checking, okay, this activity was supposed to be done, and these are the processes. So it's sort of taking a preventive approach prior to the eventual audits. Thank you.
No, I think we need to give the word here. Can I comment on this about the punitive and preventive measures in the work against corruption?
Well, I think punitive measures are preventive. So I think it is extremely important to have a clear zero tolerance policy. What would be the alternative? So I think acting against on signals and whistleblower channels have to be part of a serious anti-corruption strategy. And I think that is also a natural part of the political dialogue, because I've seen so many times that donor agencies are cautious in the way they bring up anti-corruption measures. But I think it's much easier to address anti-corruption before a scandal than in the midst of it. So I think this emphasis on zero tolerance and audit, and including forensic auditing, is extremely important. And that is also something that Norway can demand from the multilaterals, as I assume we already do. And I think another side of that is the emphasis on financial secrecy, that we have clear efforts and contribute in the fight against financial secrecy, because that is really a part of the corruption problem in development aid.
Marianne, can you comment on this?
Yes, absolutely, and thank you. You started out by asking, do we have the right mix when it comes to measures? And I do think that, as also the report says, that we do have a lot of the right ingredients in the mix for a very good result. We do have the CTP, we do have the partnerships with NGOs, international NGOs, we have the UN system, multilateral system, and we also have it in partner countries and other countries. And I believe, like I think that Tina says, that the dialogue is kind of the key. It's not only the punitive measures, but also the dialogue. We make very clear what we require, what we demand from our partners, and then the point isn't the punishment. The point is the results on the ground, to make sure that the money actually, aid comes to the aid of the people that need it the most. That is the goal. And so we have to have different ways of achieving that goal. And I do believe also in the multilateral channels that we choose to use, that they do have their own systems for audit measures. We do support the MOPAN system. It's in the dialogue also with them that we can get results on the ground. And I think that is the most important for the Norwegian development policy and the humanitarian assistance.
Thank you very much. We have a question here from the UNDP anti-corruption team, and it's the question for the team leader. It's for you, Charlotte. Did you look at contributions to anti-corruption in other programs, such as rule of law, parliamentary strengthening, access to information, local governance, civil society strengthening, etc.?
Apologize. I think the way we approach anti-corruption efforts as a distinct component is, at first we encourage Norway to have a stricter definition of what anti-corruption is. So it's not just fighting corruption head-on, it's not just promoting good governance, it's really something in the middle, which has to do with promoting accountability, transparency, integrity, as well as fighting corruption head-on. So on the basis of this definition, we were quite selective in what we looked at in terms of measuring results and checking that results had been achieved. We looked at what Norway is supporting on the global front, support through the UNCAC, support to STAR and the World Bank asset recovery. We looked also in Somalia at what Norway is contributing to in terms of promoting financial accountability and transparency, with good results, in particular strengthening the capacity of the Auditor General. And then we looked at in Indonesia at the forestry sector, where also we found some very good results with an approach that involved multiple entry points, from promoting local participation to fighting forest crime. So this is really what the approach we took for this evaluation.
Thank you. And then we have also from the UNDP anti-corruption team a question for Marianne Hagen. Does Norway consider revisiting its do no harm development approach so there is more so that there is more focus on anti-corruption results impact?
I'm not sure if I understood the question.
I think the question is if you consider revisiting the do no harm development approach.
We do have a do not harm approach. We had for a period of time, we had a do good approach, which turned out to be too demanding to getting the results that we wanted to achieve. So now we are back since 2017 on the do no harm in accordance with the SDGs.
Would you comment on that, Tina?
I think these are more words in a sense, because I think the underlying strategies are far more important than calling it do no good versus do no harm versus do good. So that's my main comment to that one, and I think it's far more important to consider how is this brought into the country levels and who are involved in following up and in what ways, and how is this communicated to all the stakeholders. So I think you could use, and we all agree that of course we must have a minimum do no harm policy.
There's one more for you, Marianne. That's often the case when we have someone from the political leadership here. It's from Lisetta Trebit for Norad. What can other parts of Norwegian aid learn from experience related to AC in the climate and forest initiative? They were given very good marks in this report. So what can be learned from the climate and forest initiative?
I think we should all read the report very carefully to look at those points, and the Minister for Foreign Affairs will do so in the weeks to come. But learning from the best practice, that's always a very, very good idea. I think if I can mention one other point that I think is a bit underestimated actually in the report, is the quality of the dialogue that we have on anti-corruption with our partners. NGOs, but also partner countries and countries that are receiving our development aid. I used to travel before the COVID-19 a lot, and it's always a very central part of our conversation with the political leaders in other countries. And there's so many entry points. When you come from Norway, there's so many entry points. They will ask about our welfare system, they like our pension fund, there's so many things that they kind of ask for our experience on, resource managing being one of them. And of course, all the international obligations that we do share with them, the UNCAC, the engagement in UNGAS, IT, the new FACTI panel, which is also a very, very good channel for us, and entry point for discussions. But my strategy is often to wait, because at some point in this meeting, he always asks, how can I attract Norwegian investors? How can I make Norwegian businesses come to my country and create jobs? And that's my moment, because then I can tell him that the Norwegian business community and the Norwegian government expect from the Norwegian business community that they act according to the UN guiding principles for human rights in business, and that they accept no corruption. And that is what we expect from them. So if they want to attract Norwegian businesses and Norwegian investments, anti-corruption is one of the definite key ingredients to achieve their results. So in that way, Norway gets kind of what we want, because that's a solution to his problem. And I think that's a very effective way to discuss this, turning it around, not something that we impose on them, but something that they can do if they want to attract us. I think I find that very effective.
Charlotte, in the report, you recommend that the MFA makes an internal working group on anti-corruption. Can you kind of explain to us why that is so important? And then I want you to answer to be clear.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I think it's very important because as you highlighted, there's been some very good elements of the zero tolerance policy that have been taken forward. Good dialogue with multilateral, on the preventive side, a lot has been happening, and this has direct benefits on Norway's delivery partners. But there are a few gaps which I've highlighted in my presentation, which I think really need to be tackled and cannot just be tackled by one unit or just a FIU or FSU. It needs to be cross-working. It needs to be working across departments for really to try to find solution to address our recommendation.
And then you have to answer, Marianne. When will the mandate of this group be ready, and when will it be created?
As I said in my intervention, that we will establish such a working group following the recommendations, and also working with other Norwegian ministries, not only within the MFA. And we will respond to the report within, I believe it's just a few weeks. I think it's in 6 weeks' time.
Mm-hmm.
So
in 6 weeks' time,
yes.
Okay. Finally, we are about to end, but I want to challenge all of you, all 4 of you. Very brief and clear. Is there one single measure you can think of that would bring some breaking news, some turn the tables policy into the issue of anti-corruption? To start with you, Samuel. Some breaking news.
I think when, good question. I think when you say some breaking news, this requires, something that almost impossible to achieve. And for me, what I think can make news is if all for example, in the context of a country like Somalia, if all the donors were to come together and agree on the minimum, anti-corruption measures that need to be taken, okay? Because why I say this is because probably, and this usually affects local partners more than the international ones, is that they are given a different kind of requirements from different sources depending on who is funding them. And we find that these measures, they may look different, but if they were to be synthesized, they would make life easier. If these donors, probably, I know it might appear impossible, will speak from one voice, from one standpoint, that this is what is required in terms of accountability measures that may mitigate against diversion, corruption, and mismanagement of funds. Thank you.
Yes, so a common minimum requirement list. Okay, Charlotte, the challenge goes to you. What can be breaking news?
I have 2. That's okay. The first one is, I think Norway is very well placed to make a difference. I mean, we saw it on the global anti-corruption agenda, and we saw it with in unique initiatives such as the Corruption Hunters Network. And the second point, really building on what Samuel said, I think there is still so many opportunities to speak with one voice, but also to learn from each other. Anti-corruption is such a complex field. Let's just really learn and just promote global knowledge.
Okay. And then we go to you, Tina.
Well, I think there could be a much clearer demand for law enforcement by the recipient countries. And I think development partners could also do more to demand from them that they contribute to recover stolen funds. And I think it is possible to work better with the private sector and civil society in these initiatives. So I think those parts would be a big change.
But this is just going on what's already introduced into this field. Do you have something new?
Forensic auditing and an enacted and implemented zero policy strategy, that is a new thing, because we are struggling so much and there's so vast amounts of aid funding that we are simply not able to control at present. So beefing up the monitoring and oversight, that is an important element, even if it has been said before.
Some more regular criminal measures, that's what you're calling
Absolutely.
for. Okay, the challenge goes to you, Marianne. What is the new thing you can bring into the debate here?
I think the new thing could be the pandemic. I do think that the pandemic could be a game changer, because if you look at the global economic downturn, all the governments, if they are to reach the SDGs, if they are to provide welfare for their people, they need to get their hands on this $2.6 trillion US. So I do think it's a question of political will, obviously, but if we can get the world leaders, country leaders, and the people to demand the same thing, that this money has to go to people and provide welfare for people. I do think that the handling of the pandemic and the Build Back Better, also when it comes to anti-corruption, could be a game changer.
Do you think that the pandemic kind of can change people's mindset on this?
I think the scarcity of available financial means will force a new dynamic in this field.
Thank you very much. And then I thank all four of you for taking this challenge. And now I leave the floor to Jan Petter Holtedal. He is the Senior Advisor and Project Manager in the Evaluation Department. He will take us through what's the way further.
Thank you so much, Eva. The Evaluation Department is governed by a separate mandate for evaluating Norway's development assistance and reports direct to the Secretary General of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Climate and Environment. The mandate requests the Evaluation Department to send the final report to the concerned ministry together with a cover memo recommending follow-up from the evaluation. The cover memo for this evaluation, together with the final report, was sent to the Secretary General of the Minister of Foreign Affairs on Friday last week. In the memo, the Evaluation Department recommends the following. First, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in dialogue with relevant stakeholders, should make explicit its anti-corruption strategy, including the linkages between the 4 categories of anti-corruption efforts, and assess the balance between control and preventive anti-corruption measures. Second, the MFA should continue its efforts towards a more ambitious global anti-corruption agenda and strengthen regular anti-corruption dialogue with partner countries. Third, Norad should facilitate overall planning and reporting of results from the anti-corruption work and facilitate learning and information exchange. Fourth, the last one, Norad should strengthen operationalization and follow-up of the anti-corruption strategy at the intervention, sector, and country levels. In line with the Evaluation Department's mandate, the Secretary General of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, based on inputs from one or more departments, embassies, and/or Norad, shall decide on how to follow up the Evaluation Department's recommendations. This follow-up plan shall be communicated to stakeholders within 6 weeks, with copies to Norad's director and the evaluation department. 1 year after the follow-up plan has been issued, a follow-up report shall be presented and shared with stakeholders, with a copy to the evaluation department. This follow-up report will be made public in an appropriate format at www.norad.no/evaluation. Many thanks. Over to you, Eva.
So I thank you all for following us here, and thank you so much for taking your time and your attention to be here today.